I will always, always, always tell fellow believers that the first place we want to start in trying to discern our unique calling is in conversation with our Creator.
Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Welcome to the show. I am so glad you're here. Did you know that there is a Girls Talking Life community group on Facebook? It's an extension of the podcast where we can connect and continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends. If you want to join in the conversation after the show and encourage others as we all grow in our faith, jump into this group. I would love to see you there. Today, I'm excited to bring you my conversation with my friend Bailey Stone. We are talking about finding our unique callings and the confidence to live out those callings. Bailey is a certified professional life coach who helps women elevate their confidence, increase clarity, so that they can pursue their calling and make an impact. On the show today, you'll hear us talk about the difference between purpose and calling, ways to discern your own unique calling, if our callings change from season to season, how to increase your confidence, and discerning God's voice. Here is my conversation with Bailey. Bailey, thank you so much for sitting down to talk with me on the show.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I have known you online for what feels like a really long time. I know that we've commented and chatted back and forth a little bit, but it is so nice to see you face to face.
Agreed. I know it's been a couple years and just excited that we're finally putting this together.
Tell me what it is that you do and just a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so I am Bailey Stone. I am a certified professional life coach, and I love helping women find clarity and confidence in their God-given calling. Coaching was something I kind of stumbled across in college and have just been really obsessed with it. And ever since, and yeah, it's truly just my passion, my calling, and something I love doing.
And where are you in the world? Who are your people?
So I'm from Montana. I'm from the biggest city in Montana, which is still pretty small. There's only about 1 million people in my state, but
wow.
Yes, from Montana. Love it here. It's a great pace of life.
I don't think that I have had anyone from Montana on the show yet. So
yes, I'll be your first.
Nice. All right. Well, I feel like people get confused when you're talking about purpose versus calling. I know that I think I've interchanged the two of them. So can you just start us off with some definitions so we know what we're talking about here?
I would love to do that. And I'll start off by saying if the concepts are confusing for you, I think absolutely you can use them interchangeably. Personally, I've just found it helpful to dig into the definitions and really know what I'm seeking from the Lord and what I'm asking from Him. So when we think about the word purpose, if we look up a definition, what we're going to see is the reason for which something is done, the reason for which something is created, or the reason for which something exists. So a lot of us find ourselves, asking God, what is my purpose? And what we're really asking is, why do I exist? Why did you create me? And it's a fantastic question to ask. And just in studying the word and doing a lot of seeking and reading and studying, what I found is that we can really boil our purpose down to, as believers, God created us just to be loved by Him and to love Him in return. And I think that's hard for us to grasp sometimes because we all want to believe that there's more. There has to be more to it. There has to be a deeper meaning or purpose. But really, I think that's the foundation of our purpose for being created and our purpose for existing is just to know God, to know His love, and to go out and share it. So then conversely, when we look at the word calling, there's a little bit more to it. And I have a definition here that I would love to share. I go to Merriam-Webster, and in Merriam-Webster, we find that the definition of a calling is a strong inner impulse toward a particular course of action, especially when accompanied by divine conviction.
Okay.
And so that's a lot different definition than the reason for which something exists, the reason for which something is created. And the reason I pull a secular definition is because I think it's helpful to know kind of how the world defines calling, and then really dig into God's word and ask God, what do you say about a calling? And I do love that secular definition there says, especially when accompanied by divine influence. So we'll just call that what it is, right? That's God. That's God working.
Yeah.
That's him calling us towards something, drawing us towards something. And I do think that the calling can get a little bit more specific. And I think we'll chat about that in a moment. But for us as Christians, really the calling is to go out and make disciples, to love God and love people.
Okay. I love that. Thank you for just clarifying what the difference is between the two. In Ephesians 2:10, it says that God created good works for us to do, and he created that in advance. So I feel like, we know that we have these works to do and he's called us to them, but how do we specifically find out, okay, Bailey, what are my calling, or what is my calling versus what is your calling?
Yeah, great question. I will always, always, always tell fellow believers that the first place we want to start in trying to discern our unique calling is in conversation with our Creator. And there are other things we can do. I think there are exercises and questions, and even, that's where coaching comes into play for a lot of people. But the first place that we want to start as believers is getting in conversation with God, really asking him, what have you called to do? How have you uniquely equipped and designed me? So get into really serious prayer, read the word. And from there, if you're still feeling a little murky, which most of us do, myself included, right. Rarely does God's voice boom from the heavens and, there it is. We've got our calling, right? So something that I think we can do to start to really tease out the nuance of our personal calling is to consider the things that you are good at. Or another way to say that is, what are my unique gifts and talents? How has God created me to excel in certain places? And the Bible has quite a bit to say about spiritual gifts. So it's great to get familiar with passages of the Bible that talk about our spiritual gifts. I think it's really great to take a spiritual gifts assessment if you've never taken a spiritual gifts assessment, and start to consider how you've been created uniquely and what you're good at. To piggyback on that, I would also encourage anyone who's wondering what their calling is to think about two things in particular. One is going to be the things that break your heart. So there might be a cause or condition that just weighs heavy on you. And often the things that break our heart are things that break God's heart too. So what might break your heart could be human trafficking. It could be homelessness. It could be hunger in your community. There are a million different things that could break your heart. And I would encourage the listeners today to not dismiss those things. Don't dismiss the things that break your heart. Don't count yourself out from making a difference there. And along with your heartbreak, get in touch with your passions. What are you passionate about? What are the things that fire you up? You love doing them. You could talk about it endlessly. And as we consider those three things, your talents, your heartbreak, and your passions, you start to get a really well-rounded idea of how God has uniquely positioned you to go out and make disciples and go out and make an impact for his kingdom. And I think that is a really great jumping off point when it comes to considering your personal calling.
Okay. I love that. Those are really good places to start. And you mentioned what breaks your heart, and you even said human trafficking. And that was something that a few years back was really a strong passion of mine. And I tried to kind of pursue that and be helpful and do some different things. But my season of life just did not work for me. My children were smaller, and the stories I was hearing were more than I could handle. I just felt like, yes, that is something that breaks my heart, but me working in that field right now is not, it's just not good for me. So can your calling change from season to season?
That's a question I get a lot. So I think our personal call, like the base calling, stays the same. I absolutely think your calling looks different in different seasons. especially for the reason that you just brought up. The way you fulfill your calling or pursue your calling is going to look a lot different when you're single than when you're married, than when you're having kiddos, and on and on. So I think it can just take different shapes in different seasons. And I want to extend all the grace and all the permission to anyone who's been struggling with that to really, again, go back to conversation with God, ask him, now that my season has changed, what does this look like? How can I make an impact? And especially for my mama friends, just chatting with a lot of my friends who are in the thick of that parenthood season. Sometimes the work you do in your home right now is the fulfillment and embodiment of your calling. And that is some of the most beautiful work you will ever do for God's kingdom, is just shaping those little minds and hearts.
Thank you for that permission. We probably need it, and we need to be reminded of it often.
Absolutely.
So once we get clearer about our calling, then you say one of the other barriers to actually living it out is not having the confidence to do it. So yes. How do we gain that confidence? How do we muster up what we need to live in our calling?
Yes, and confidence is such a unique thing, especially for us women. I just know in my own journey, confidence has been a progression. It can fluctuate. Again, like we were talking with seasons, just whatever is going on in our life, there are going to be different times where we might feel more confident or less confident. So know that that's okay, first and foremost. Second of all, I think it's really important to root our confidence in Christ. We have everything we are ever going to need through him. And he took all of our shame. He took all of our sin, and he bore that on the cross for us. So we don't need to be held back by that. We don't need to be held back by insecurity or past transgressions, or anything that the enemy tempts us to think are disqualifiers from doing what we've been called to do. So really get tight with Jesus, really use him as your foundation and anchor in your confidence. I think with that, there are a couple other practical things we can do. And when I'm coaching with somebody or teaching on the topic of confidence, one of the first things I'm always going to bring up is to take a courageous step. So courage, we can think of the definition of courage of being scared and doing it anyway. Whereas confidence is, we're proficient, we've got this, we're pretty secure when we reach confidence. But confidence starts with taking courageous steps. So one small courageous step after another is going to compound into confidence. So for anyone feeling maybe a little bit anxious, insecure, uncertain, identify one small step you could take that might be a little bit scary, but it's going to start moving you in the direction of growth. And you are going to start seeing a whole lot of confidence blossoming out of those small steps.
It's just practice, right? You do it a few times totally. And then you feel a little better about it. So you do it again. Right.
And, there's this concept of imposter syndrome that I think all of us have heard about at least once or twice at this point. A lot of us start out as feeling like imposters or feeling insecure, but once we, can have the confidence to go out there, do the thing, be okay with not being an expert or not being the best the first time we do anything, those are the steps that truly lead to lasting confidence that has a really secure foundation.
You have an article on your website and you list confidence myths. And I really like the one that says it requires effort. So like what we just talked about, you actually have to continue to do something. And then you don't have to have confidence in every single area, which I think is a huge one. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yes. And I love that one because I don't know about you, but when I think about confidence, I think of the girl who just walks in the room. She's owning it. She's got a big personality. She might be talking loud. But even when we think about maybe that persona of a confident woman, there are areas in her life where she's not an expert, where she doesn't have it all figured out or all together. And I just know in my journey and in the journeys of women that I've worked with and talked with, we sometimes shy away from calling ourselves confident or from owning confidence because we'll say, well, I'm really confident in my parenting, but I'm not so confident in fill in the blank. Or I'm really confident when it comes to leading my Bible study, but I'm not so confident in fill in the blank. Well, you can call yourself a confident person, and you can be a confident person in general without having every single area of your life, bursting with confidence, totally secure, no doubt or struggles.
I think that is such a good thing to know and recognize. So one of the things that you say is that community plays a big part in our clarity and our confidence. Girls Talking Life is all about community. I want women to listen here when they can't be with their girlfriends, but then be with their girlfriends in real life when they can be. What role does community have in calling and confidence?
Community is so essential. I can't overemphasize how important it is to sustain both your calling and your confidence. And personally, this was something I used to hear a lot, the importance of community, community emphasized. We see in the Bible over and over again examples of why and how community is so important. But it was a bit of a challenge. So once I got to the point of actually challenging myself to get in community, prioritize it, and make it important, I saw huge growth and change in my own life. Something I love to share when talking about the importance of community is something my own personal life coach once said, and that is that confidence isn't created in a vacuum. And what she means by that is we need others. We need the encouragement of other people. We actually need pushback from others when we might be stepping out of our lane or stepping out of our bounds. And ultimately, we need people to build us up if we're going to, have endurance in our calling. I believe that the enemy would love nothing more than to get us isolated and to have us try to do things and to try to be confident on our own. But it's so, so true that two is better than one and that community is essential in just about everything we do.
I'm not going to remember the name of the book, but in a book I read, the woman has a chapter all about naming it. She talks about when people name things that you're good at, it empowers you in a way that nothing else can, because a lot of times we can't see the things that we're good at ourselves. So telling someone when they're good at something or when you see something special in them is really what you're talking about. That's the encouragement that they need, or maybe even a blind spot that you're opening them up to be like, oh yeah, this is something I'm good at, or it is something that I enjoy. Maybe that's a route I should look into more.
Absolutely. I mean, how weird would life be if we went through our entire lifespan never hearing encouragement from anybody else, never having, like I said, that speak into or feedback when we step out of line, or it's so, so important. And I believe God created us this way and geared us to even need that verbal edification from others and to be built up by others. It's so important.
You talked at the very beginning about getting into communication, being in prayer, and finding out what God says about your calling. How do we discern his voice? Like, how do we know, okay, is this really God talking to me, or am I putting these thoughts in my head?
Such a great question. There are a lot of different ways that we can discern God's voice. One of the most tried and true and tested ways is to get into the Bible. The Bible is the Word of God translated into text. So being in your Bible is going to be one of the best ways you learn his voice, his nature, and more about him. I also think that, speaking of community, that can be a really great way to get some feedback. I know personally, I've gone to mentors before and been like, I think I'm hearing this thing from God. I'm not sure. What do you think? Does this line up with what you know about God and with what his word says? It's a really great way to make sure that, you truly are hearing God's voice. And another thing I would say is I'm actually going through one of those 365-day devotionals, and it's called Hearing His Voice. And one of my biggest takeaways from that devotional is that when God speaks to us, sometimes it's almost as if we're hearing him in our voice, because that's how we understand him. That's how he speaks to us. So I would say that when you think you're hearing from God, put it to the test, try it out, follow it. Don't dismiss it as, oh, that's just a weird random thought I'm having, or that's just, an impulse that'll pass. I would challenge you to get more in tune with that and tap into that a little bit more.
One of the things that helps me is God often asks us to step outside our comfort zone when he's directing us in our calling. And so if it's something that I'm like, I don't really want to do that. That sounds uncomfortable or scary, or I don't have the confidence in that area. And I often know it's not my idea.
Right. Yes, it's so true that God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the calls. If it scares you or it's a little bit intimidating, you're probably onto something.
Well, you are a professional life coach. So what are some services or what are some things that you would do to work with women who are interested in getting more clear on their calling?
Absolutely. So I think a big misconception about what we call peer coaching, Pure coaching, people think that when you hire a coach, my job is to just load you up with advice, tell you all the things you need to do and change and yada, yada, yada. Really, my job as a coach is to listen to my client's story and help them identify where they want to go, what the barriers are that are standing in their way, and how we're really going to make it actionable. And coaching is very personal. Each and every one of my clients is different, but the results and the growth that happens is just, it's so amazing. It's something that fills me up and 100% glorifies God. So I would say there's not necessarily a prerequisite or a one-size-fits-all approach to coaching, but I just know the benefit that I've seen in my own life and the lives of my clients.
This is not something that I asked you to prepare for, but do you have an example, either from your own life or from a client that you could share?
I'll share an example from someone that I coached with a couple months ago. One of the things I asked her is, when was the last time that you felt truly confident? And as coaches, we know it's a good question when they sit there and have to chew on it for a second. You know, as coaches, we're also kind of looking for the aha moment in a session where the shift happens and the perspective and the mindset really change. And for that client, that was just her aha moment, her wow moment. When was the last time I felt truly confident? And what was it about that situation that made me feel confident? And from that one situation and that one question, we were able to identify some things that she might need in her current season in order to walk in confidence and embrace her confidence. I wish I had like a more profound example, but that is just the first thing that came to mind in thinking about the last time a client really needed some confidence work.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course, yeah.
Is there anything else that we should know before we shift gears to something else?
Anyone who's curious about coaching, confidence, clarity, any of it, I am always happy to answer your questions. And I think anybody else who you may have met who speaks on these topics or who coaches themselves, I love answering questions. And I know my colleagues would probably say the same. Never feel intimidated to reach out or to want to know more.
Awesome. Well, now I'm going to ask for your favorite 5. So Bailey, I would love to know 5 things that you're wearing or drinking or reading or doing that are your favorites right now.
Yes. So one of them I mentioned, and that's the Hearing His Voice devotional.
Yeah.
That is my favorite devotional right now. It's the way I start my morning, and that's by Chris Tygreen. You could start it at any time of the year, and it's just amazing. That's one of my favorite things right now. Along with that is, so I use this planner every single year, and it's called the Live with Purpose Planner. And it just helps me set goals, track them, and stay like on track, focused, without being overbearing or, you know, making me feel like shameful or guilty when I am off track. It's just been a really great resource. Not on the topic of, you know, planners, devotionals, or any of that, but I've been loving Joanna Gaines's Hearth and Home Harvest Spice candle. But you walk past, you know, her section in Target, and you just have to buy the candles and all the pretty things. So love that one. Another thing I've been loving is storage bins for my produce. How like nerdy and adult is that?
That sounds right up my alley.
Yes, I finally caved and bought some. They've been a game changer. I love them. And the last thing on my favorite 5 was the Supreme Cream from Beauty Counter. And I don't sell Beauty Counter. I just invested in it recently and it's been amazing. I didn't realize how, underappreciated my pore skin was until I started using it.
Is
And
this a moisturizer?
It is. Yeah. It's like a nighttime moisturizer and
Okay.
it's amazing.
All right. Very good to know. Thank you for sharing those with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on. I love this topic. And I think it's something that we all struggle with, maybe multiple times in our life. So having someone available that can talk us through, give us ideas, make a plan even to move forward. Because really, if you're a follower of Jesus, that's what you want to do. That's where your heart is, but you don't know which direction to go in necessarily. So thank you, Bailey, for giving us some direction.
Absolutely. It's been so great to be on the show.
Thank you so much for listening. I love Bailey's heart for helping women in this way. I really do believe that all of us want to serve God doing what He created us to do. But I also know that figuring out exactly what that is can be hard. So I hope Bailey's words were helpful to you. And if you'd like to find out more about working with her, go to BaileyStoneCoaching.com. Also, I found the book that I mentioned about naming it. It's The Sound of a Million Dreams by Sue Ann Camfield. I linked to it for you in the show notes. Everything we talked about, including this book, including how to connect more with Bailey, can be found in the show notes for today's episode on girlstalkinglife.com. And friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. Get into community and see how it can encourage you in your calling. I will see you back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in.